More and more Jews are returning to the Torah, to the God of Israel, and the ways of their forefathers. And more are beginning to realize that the Holy Temple is the only solution for achieving elusive world peace. A passage in the book of Psalms states, "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. We hung our harps upon the willows in the midst of it, for there those who carried us away required of us a song, and those who plundered us required us of mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing Hashem's song in a foreign land if I forget you? O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her skill. If I do not remember you, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy." The passage in the book of Psalms, a hymn of the exiles of Jerusalem during the Babylonian captivity, eloquently expresses the yearnings of the Jewish people for their homeland, their city, and their temple, then and now. Jerusalem has always remained the focal point of the Jewish people and the object of all their yearnings. The Jews have never had another capital, and it has never been the capital of any other nation. The unique status the city holds is unparalleled, and the Holy Temple that stood in Jerusalem is what gave the city its eternal meaning. It still continues to inspire its future hope, the wonder of the world, and the focal point for the prayers of mankind. Through all their bitter wanderings, Jews have prayed 3 times a day, saying, "May the Holy Temple be rebuilt quickly and in our day." And when a Jew prays, wherever in the world he happens to be, he stands and faces Jerusalem and the spot of the Holy Temple, just as Daniel did in Babylon. The act of facing Jerusalem in prayer shows solidarity with their spiritual source. For a period spanning nearly 1,000 years, the Holy Temple functioned as the heart of the Jewish people. It was the center of life for all that was considered of value in Israel: the kingdom, the spirit of prophecy, and most importantly, the divine service. According to Jewish belief, the Holy Temple was not just some magnificent building or synagogue rooted in Jerusalem's ancient biblical past. It was an arena of cosmic themes, a place where man could meet with his Creator. This represents one of the most important concepts of Jewish belief, that man has the capacity to engage in a direct, constant, and fulfilling relationship with his Creator. It was the world's true spiritual center at the time, and the medium for that unfolding relationship between man and God. This is the role of the Holy Temple in the life of man: to enable one to realign himself, to dedicate one's whole self to God, to elevate every aspect of the human experience and return the energy which he gives us to his service. Solomon's Temple, also known as the First Temple, is the name of the temple in Jerusalem, which according to the Hebrew Bible was built during the reign of King Solomon. It was destroyed in 587 BCE by the Babylonian Empire under the second Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar II. Although most scholars today agree that a temple existed on the Temple Mount by the time of the Babylonian siege, its construction date and the identity of its builder are debated, with some stories stating that King Solomon used an enchanted talisman or ring to bind demons given to him by God, to use them to build the first temple as a punishment and a sign of dominance in the ancient text of the Testament of Solomon. However, though, in the Hebrew Bible, and specifically the Book of Kings, includes a detailed narrative about the construction of the temple by the Israelite King Solomon, who, it says, placed the ark in the Holy of Holies, which was the Ark of the Covenant, who Moses put the 10 Commandments, Aaron's staff, and reportedly manna inside of it. He put it in a windowless inner sanctum within the temple. Entry into the Holy of Holies was heavily restricted, and only the high priest of Israel entered the sanctuary once per year on the Jewish holiday Yom Kippur, carrying the blood of a sacrificial lamb and burning incense. The temple not only served as a religious building for worship, but was also a place of assembly for the Israelites. The destruction of the temple and the Babylonian exile were seen as fulfillments of biblical prophecies, and in turn affected Judaic religious beliefs. The Second Temple, also known in its later years as Herod's Temple, was the reconstruction of the Jewish Holy Temple that stood on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem. It replaced the First Temple, built at the same location during Solomon's reign over Israel, that had been destroyed by the Babylonian Empire during its conquest of the Kingdom of Judah. Construction on the Second Temple began sometime after the conquest of Babylon by the Persian Empire, following a proclamation by the Persian King Cyrus the Great that enabled the Jews to return to Zion. The completion of the Second Temple marked the beginning of the Second Temple period in Jewish history. The Second Temple stood for approximately 585 years before its destruction in 70 CE by the Roman Empire as a retaliation for an ongoing Jewish revolt. The Third Temple, which would succeed both the original Solomon's Temple as well as the Second Temple, is the sole desire for the people in Jerusalem and Israel in general. The prophets in the Hebrew Bible called for its construction to be fulfilled. The rebuilding of a Third Temple also plays a major role in the Book of Revelation. The notion of rebuilding a Third Temple at the Temple Mount has been a controversial subject by many and remains a key subject of tension between Muslims and Jews due to the existence of the Dome of the Rock, which is an Islamic sanctuary that was built on top of the site where the first and second Jewish temples were and was constructed in the late 7th century CE. The issue at the Temple Mount has been a major factor in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and its peace process. While Jerusalem in its entirety has been controlled by Israel since the Six-Day War of 1967, it is to a large extent recognized as disputed territory between Israel and Palestine, due to both entities proclaiming the city as their capital. The most immediate and obvious obstacle to realization of these goals is the fact that two historic Islamic structures, which are 13 centuries old, are built on top of the Temple Mount. Any efforts to damage or reduce access to these sites, or to build Jewish structures within, between, beneath, or replace them, could lead to severe international conflicts, given the association of the Muslim world with these holy places, as it is highly regarded that the Dome of the Rock is occupying the actual space where the Second Temple once stood. In very recent times, some scholars and archaeologists disagree and instead claim that the temple was located either just north of the Dome of the Rock or about 200 meters south of it, with access to the Gihon freshwater spring. In addition, some Jewish scholars are hesitant with any attempts to build the temple just yet. This is because there are many doubts as to the exact location in which it is required to be built. Despite obstacles, efforts are underway by various religious leaders and political movements to find the exact location of the foundation of the original temples and start the construction of the upcoming Third Temple. With all this going on, what does a red heifer have to do with any of this? Perhaps it would be difficult for some to believe that a simple cow could be so important, but in truth, the fate of prophecy depends on the red heifer, for according to religious scholars, its ashes alone are the single missing ingredient for the reinstatement of biblical purity, and thereafter, the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. There is an important tradition taught by rabbis that there is a connection between the concept of the red heifer and the sin of the golden calf, which Israel, while waiting for Moses to descend from the mountain of God, turned their back on him and committed grievous sins against him in the desert 40 days after the revelation of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. The consequences of this sin were enormous, for it was the single event which introduced the concept of impurity. Many Jewish scholars say there is a connection between the golden calf and the red heifer. Judaic law is concerned with several types of impurity, which have a direct effect on everyday life, especially when the Holy Temple is standing. The most severe type of impurity to the Jewish people is that which is caused by exposure to death. There are several methods for restoring purity, most notably immersion in water. But with that being said, the Torah's exclusive antidote to the impurity of death is purification by sprinkling of the red heifer's ashes. In ancient times, many of the thousands who arrived at the Holy Temple had to undergo this process before they could enter into the court of the temple. The ordinance of the red heifer has detailed requirements which must be met. Some of these are directly in the biblical verses of Numbers chapter 19. Many others were transmitted orally through time, then passed down by the rabbis throughout the generations until the present day. These are expounded upon in the writings of the oral Jewish tradition. The heifer must be 3 years old and perfect in its redness. This means that the presence of as few as 2 hairs of any other color will render it invalid. It is related that for this reason, the red heifer was always very expensive. Even its hooves must be red. It must also be totally free from any physical blemish or defect, whether internal or external. And as of late September of 2022, a recent delivery of 5 red heifers from Texas to Israel is causing a stir, as talk is growing that their arrival is prophetic and a sign that the temple in Israel is almost ready to be rebuilt. The heifers were discovered and brought to Israel with the help of the Building Israel organization and its team leader, Byron Stinson. Rabbis from the Temple Mount Institute in Jerusalem approached the man Stinson about the unique cattle. An interview with Stinson took place, where he commented, stating this: "They said to me, 'Could you, in Texas, find us a red heifer?' And I wasn't expecting to hear this that day, and it was shocking to me to think about it. But I know a lot of ranchers, and I know a little about cattle. I always say yes to these Jewish rabbis, because they're my friends, and I love them, and why not?" This began the process of finding the rare cattle that meets key stipulations found in the Torah, as he stated this: "So the criteria is to make sure every hair is clearly, distinctly red all the way through. There's no playing around with it. You have to look at all the hairs, and you have to have a heifer that's all red. On top of that criteria is the animal can never be used for work. And then the biggest one that almost disqualifies is it can't have any blemish of any kind. The ashes of the red heifer would be used to purify water from the Gihon spring in the city of David. Just a few ashes could purify thousands of gallons of water, so they can offer sacrifices in the temple." Stinson also commented, saying that he believes this could be a step towards the building of a 3rd Jewish temple, as he stated this: "So it's the first step. Before you can actually start building on the temple, you have to go to a higher level of purity. As I read the Bible," he says, "this rebuilding of the temple happens here at a time when the world's in need for it. And I think we're at that time, just as a person that's watching events in the world, that we really need to come back to our roots and back to our God. And so yeah, I think we're very close to that time. I really do. The red heifer must also be at least 2 years old. The Texas cattle are just around a year old and could qualify in just over a year." Stinson hopes that if no white or black hairs appear on the cattle, at least one of them could become the first qualified red heifer in the last 2,000 years, with him making a comment stating that, I think with 5 of them, we have a really good chance of that. In the 12th century, the Jewish sage Maimonides said that throughout the first and second temple periods, there were 9 red heifers. He predicted the 10th would be a signal for the appearance of the Messiah, which also explains why many of the Jewish people are excited about the arrival of the cattle.
This is the moment. They've arrived, and we're about to see them for the first time here in the land of Israel. In that, behind that wooden, inside that wooden box. You can see them peeking out. They look beautiful. Perfect. They just look perfect. They look happy, content. Wow, these look like the finest red heifers from around the world. For those not familiar with the song, it's all about the Holy Temple.
In addition to the shipment of the red heifers, the ritual garments and vessels have already been created for the reconstruction of the temple, such as all the tools and instruments required, copper vessels used for meal offerings, and even the golden menorah, the 7-branched candle holder, has been crafted, along with the Levitical musical instruments, such as silver trumpets, lyres, and harps, to worship the Lord, just as King David did 3,000 years ago. The Temple Institute School is also training certified, DNA-tested descendants of the High Priest of Aaron to perform the temple duties. Everything is almost ready for the rebuilding of the Third Temple, and with rumors and whispers of archaeologists already discovering the site of the original temple, and even some rumors going as far as Israel having in its possession the Ark of the Covenant, Israel and its people are in disbelief and deep emotion over their temple finally being restored. However, a dark truth to many Christians lies in wait, and a serious question arises, not only for the Jewish community, but for all believers in Jesus Christ. And that question is, will the next temple, the Third Temple, will it be Ezekiel's temple, where the divine presence will once again reside? Or will a dark and evil presence reside in the temple? In the prophetic writings of the book of Daniel, we find significant details about the role of a rebuilt temple in the end times. Both the prophet Daniel and Jesus Christ himself tell us that the anti-Messiah, or better known as the Antichrist, will defile the Third Temple before the return of the true Messiah, which would be the second coming of Jesus Christ during Revelation. They both called this spiritual defilement in the temple as the abomination of desolation, as it says in the book of Matthew. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore, and understand, that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Scholars claim through the study of numerous end-time scriptures and parallels between past events and future events that they believe that this prince or ruler, the anti-Messiah or Antichrist, will appear just as Daniel describes. Daniel says he will confirm a covenant of peace for 1 week, often interpreted as 7 years, but break that covenant in the middle of the term, where it says, "And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate." Many say the anti-Messiah will proclaim himself to be God, as it says in the book of Thessalonians, chapter 2. "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit nor by word, nor by letter, as it is from us, that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, unless there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he sit as God in the temple of God, showing himself to be God. Remember not, when I was yet with you, I told you these things. And now you know what is withholding him, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. And then shall that wicked one be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him who is coming is according to the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all of the deceit of unrighteousness in those who perish, because they received not the love of truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned, who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. The Temple Institute, as well as several other faithful movements, are the main Jewish organizations are responsible for making preparations for the Third Temple and the reinstatement of sacrificial worship, and the belief that the temple will reconnect all of creation with one another and to God. But with the writings of the Bible shows an eerie and dark alternate reality for the construction of the Third Temple and the coming of the Antichrist at the end of times as we know it. It is noteworthy to point out that during the reign of King Manasseh, who abandoned the Judaic faith of Jehovah until the reign of King Hosea, the god Baal and the host of heaven, or several different angels, were also worshipped at the first temple, as well as the goddess Asherah. The temple also had prostitutes who performed sacred ritual prostitution at the temple. During the reform of King Hosea, the cult objects of the sun and Asherah were taken out of the temple, and the practice of sacred prostitution and the worship of Baal and the host of heaven were stopped immediately. With this information, and also the fact that rituals and Freemasonry referred to King Solomon and the building of his temple, where Masonic buildings and the lodges have their members meet, are sometimes called temples, along with the Kabbalah, which views the design of the Temple of Solomon, which many scholars say are a representation of the metaphysical world and the descending light of the Creator through the Tree of Life, although many argue and say that these designs and knowledge were twisted for dark occult usage and used not as intended by God, with the Christian viewpoint as having no need for a temple because Jesus Christ was the ultimate sacrifice for all human sin and our bodies are the only temple needed, and the Judaic viewpoint as the Messiah has yet to appear. One has to ask, will the rebuilding of the temple bring people closer to God? Or will it be another step in the end times prophecy, where the Antichrist, Satan incarnate, will use it to deceive and bring upon destruction over all mankind? With events pointing towards a near future where the temple will be rebuilt in our lifetime, we ask ourselves, what comes next? Thanks for watching. Till next time.